not take.
Didn't take. Aw.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining us in Niven Ink Fest weekend 2. I hope you all are having a wonderful Saturday. I know I am. Without further ado, I'm going to head it over to Elana.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm so excited to be hosting this panel today. I love a virtual conference. My name's Elana Levin. Pronouns are they, them. I am the host of Graphic Policy Radio, a podcast at the intersection of comics, genre media, and movements for social change. And I've written about comics, superheroes, and related subjects for The Daily Beast, Wired, The Guardian, and many more. And I love when I get to talk with my fellow queer creators, especially today, getting to talk with a whole trans crew of trans, non-binary, gender fluid creators and the characters that they create. And today's theme is representation through trans joy. Trans, non-binary, gender fluid, and genderqueer characters are often portrayed through hardship. What happens when their stories are centered on joy and neutrality? This panel brings together comics creators who explore the possibilities of representation by creating characters and narratives that celebrate gender diversity with humor and hope. Join us for a conversation about the powerful of joyful storytelling, the creative choices that make it possible, and the importance of seeing trans and non-binary lives reflected in ways that are about more than just survival. So thank you again, Rin, for inviting me, by the way, to be moderator. In fact, I'll introduce you first. Rin, they, them, is the one-person team behind the comic Neon Pantheon, it's a creator-owned comic that draws power from personal experiences with disability and mental illness, attempting to turn struggle into something unapologetically bright, bold, and human. And with a very iconic color palette, I would add. Rin is non-binary and is based outside of the San Francisco Bay Area. Welcome to the panel, Rin.
Thank you. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Yay. Joining me as Jadzia Axelrod, a repeat podcast guest of mine. Jadzia, she, her, is the author of Galaxy, the Prettiest Star. Galaxy as the World Falls Down. Hawk Girl, Once Upon a Galaxy. Themes here because of her characters. And Justice League Intergalactic for DC Comics, as well as the DC Book of Pride for DK. Stories in the Sharp Wit and Company of Women, and When We Were Young anthologies, as well as comics for Tor, Quirk Books, and Epic. She lives in Philadelphia, where she cooks needlessly elaborate meals for her wonderful wife and delightful child. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you. And can I just say, it's really great to be on a panel where I'm a fan of everybody here. Like all
Yes.
of you do such great comics, and so it's really great to be here with people who I admire and respect.
Yes. Thank you. You as well, obviously. Also joining us is Blue Delliquanti. Oh my gosh, Blue, you've been on my show and I just realized I hadn't checked with your last name. Some award-winning science fiction comic, Oh Human Star. Blue is also the creator of graphic novels and novellas like Meal with Soleil Hu, Across a Field of Starlight, and Adversary. They teach comics courses at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. Welcome, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's good to be here with you all.
And I think I mentioned you when I met you at a con. Your Oh Human Star, volume one, is the first graphic novel out on the table while she was staying with me. So that's an interesting.
That is a huge leap and big shoes for my comics to fill. But that's very flattering.
She said
I
it's
hope
very interesting, and I think it shows how these stories can speak to people with very different experiences and even different knowledge of comics as a medium. And finally, joining us is Cade Storey, he, him, trans artist exploring queer themes through storytelling, creator of How to Be Human, upcoming and existing series here, Cade.card with two R's.co. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet y'all too. I'm so excited to be, just like speaking with you guys. I'm so excited to learn even from you guys. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, one of my questions for you is this is for Cade, a lot of people use storytelling as a way to explore who they are. And has writing stories shaped your experience as a trans person? And what has that looked like for you?
Absolutely. Like, How to Be Human was truly just like an exploration of my trans journey. And obviously, it has continued on even further than that. But it's just a real personal thing that started out. And I'm just really happy to be here and like just like see how far like not only like my experience as a trans person has gone, but like also like how this story has impacted other trans people and representing like, like their journey as well.
What's something really awesome that someone has said to you about the impact of it on them or life?
I definitely have seen some comments like on Webtoon and stuff like that. Be like, I have, been questioning a lot of things about myself, and this comic has helped me realize certain things. Just really excited, to have read something that they connect with, in their journey to help them piece together. Because it is kind of a confusing process when you're starting in that journey. Because you live your whole life in your own skin, and like you see yourself differently than other people probably see themselves internally. And then so like when you start to connect those dots and someone else is able to kind of verbalize it or visualize it for you, that's when those, connections start to be more apparent in your mind.
Mm. Um, One of the things that I had heard about is, I've seen the really powerful, moving ending of your series, and you actually had to deal with it being censored because trans people's bodies are often censored in depictions. And so you have a character, and we see their top surgery scars, and like, or sorry, his top surgery scars.
Mhm.
Uh, and that was censored, even though it's like definitionally, literally not a woman's boobs. Like that's
Yeah.
the whole like undisputable fact. Can you talk about that experience?
It's just, from like a corporate standpoint of Webtoon, when they allow creators to post to their platform, they can only have so much accountability and they have to also adhere to a lot of restrictions. But at the same time, they've automated it to a point to where it's really not like really being like referenced it like by real humans. And then they kind of, when you are actually getting with a real person, they kind of have to double down because they don't even have those lines, like it's very blurred for them, and so they just
Mhm.
have to stick to their specific rules without really understanding the context. When I made that scene, I was very much thinking of like Sailor Moon in the early 90s, kind of like this
Oh
magical
yeah.
girl transformation sequence, but instead, with a trans man's body. And that's what I was just trying to replicate, and of course, we live in such a crazy timeline. Like, even like that's too risque nowadays, even though it really is no different, from what we were, just having on as a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah, no, like the entire comics genre is full of men without shirts on. Like that's just
Exactly.
for whatever reason, it's a very common appearance. Um, so speaking of joy here, I want to I want to turn a little bit over to Rin. Is there a time where a reader connected with your work in a way that really stuck with you?
Yeah, so I feel very privileged, and my comic is has only been going for about 8 months, which I know is like fetal for like a web comic. But I have
It seems like
received,
a lot
It's
of
actually
there's a
very
lot of
impressive.
content. Yeah, there's a lot of content.
yeah,
I mean, you've done eight
yeah.
months. Most of them like peter out very soon. So like the fact that
Mhm.
you've gone 8 months is pretty cool.
Yeah.
My daily affirmation is I'm going to succeed because I'm insane, and it's working out so far. Um, but yeah, I've been really privileged to have gotten so many really nice comments and messages. I think they come from a couple different places. The two main characters in my story are like this ride or die kind of couple, and the main character cast is a non-binary, gender non-conforming character. And I think one, just seeing a romantic relationship kind of really resonates with a lot of people. I've received, honestly, messages that have made me tear up about how, like, oh, it makes them feel like maybe they can find somebody who will love them in that same way. It gives them hope that they can find them their place like in a romantic relationship. Because I have like a lot of like gender fluid readers who are sort of like, some days I'm a boy and some days I'm a girl. And I've had partners who have only loved one side of me, or that's how they felt. Kind of like Cade, I've had readers who have told me that the comic has helped them through like periods of transition and their transition. And I think like it kind of goes to show like we're talking about like joy, and I think joy is a lot of different things to different people. And for me, joy is just being able to live. And the main character is kind of like a mess. Like they crash out, they want to die a whole lot, but they also like love living, and they're very colorful and very funny. And I think that has just kind of like resonated with a lot of people. A lot of people sort of, I hear it, quote, "That's so me" all the time with this main character nonstop. And a lot of times they're very joyful and a lot of times they're kind of miserable. But I think that to me like has resonated to a lot of readers. And to me, I think that's very joyful.
That's really wonderful. I feel like a lot of the times we really do get either the sense that queer and trans stories are either trauma or they're for children. And like it's one or the other. And I've even had creators tell me, like writers and artists tell me that they were told that books they were working on were not sellable because they were not either trauma or for children. So I don't know if this is something that anybody here has been confronted with in your in public responses to your stories. And it's okay if you can or can't talk about it, but I just
Hmm. I mean, something I'll say is that in my experience with just like, so I teach and I am, around like readers of various ages, and I've seen like the stories that like readers of various ages engage with, and they often have like, especially young readers have a much more sophisticated concept of queer identity and queer concepts than many people or institutions give them credit for. What I find interesting in the landscape, kind of like to build off of what you're saying, is that, a lot of the books aimed at younger readers are like introductory concepts, like queer 101 concepts, right? And what I found and what I've talked about with other like writers and creators and like comic creators is that there's sort of a missing area of like queer 201, or like the next step up of like, okay, I think I am this thing, I feel like I feel this way. So what does that mean for my adult life? What does that mean for my future in the workforce? What does that mean for like my dating life? Like these things that like, as readers grow and like age, like that they have questions about, and maybe there is a gulf in the marketplace of books of like that are not addressing those questions or meeting them at that level of sophistication beyond this is what these terms mean.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I was really happy that I got to do a sequel to Galaxy the Prettiest Star, which is a coming out story. And then the sequel was all about like, well, now that you've come out, now what do you do? Which is I feel like is a prime story like drama factory, right? Like that whole experience of being a queer person and trying to discover, like find your people and find your identity and make peace with the fact that how people are going to perceive you now is different. And
yeah.
like that's not something we have the stories of. Like we have the coming out, and then sometimes we get someone who's very established in their identity and
Mm-hmm.
are doing that. We don't have that middle part, like you say, that 2.0. So I was really happy to be able to do that.
Well, one of the themes that, is through your series and through your character is this world building piece you've done about Galaxy's origins and looking at the vein with the alien group that she originally comes from. And she has to deal with the anxiety and fear of like literally there's very powerful people with all kinds of space stuff out to get her, but you see her live her whole life this like full, once she's able to transition, like full joyful life, like feels a little bit, not disconnected from the world that we function in now. Why was that an important message for you to show?
Because it's really easy to get bogged down in um, the oppression, for lack of a better phrase. Um, that there's all these forces, certainly in this country, but also all over the world, that really want us to be unhappy and want us to be beaten down and want us to be hiding and scared and sad. And um, not being any of that is such a radical act and is such a powerful act and such a difficult act. It's not easy to find your joy in these circumstances. It's not easy to get up and wave your queer flag high if you worry that that's going to make you lose your job or your life. Like that's hard to do for a lot of people. And Um, it shouldn't be. And even if it is, we should still do it because I think it's very important, for the very least, for the other people who are looking for those flags and need to see those flags for their lives, if not for our own, of just having a good time now and then. For crying out loud, it's a crime.
Yeah, yeah,
It
for
is in
sure.
some states.
Right. Blue, how did you work to blend real transition experiences with sci-fi and fantasy ideas? I think there's often a tension people have because, like in the 90s and the 80s and farther back, all we were able to do in a lot of these genres, if they weren't made by queer people for a clear queer audience, like you have everything was metaphor. Everything had to be metaphor. And so
Mhm.
now we're in this period where like you can do metaphor and you can do not metaphor. And like how do you make, you're making choices about what you're going to handle with which way. And so how have you navigated that in your stories?
It's something I think a lot about because you're right, to some extent, there is a level of, I guess, plausible deniability that can often occur with like science fiction or fantasy as a reference for things, but not exclusively. I mean, in comics, especially with creators like Rachel Pollack is one that I think of in terms of like someone who has talked about like being a queer person, being a trans like person, and also being a superhero and also having powers and like synthesizing those things in different ways. Like it has been done, but there is often a safety that comes with having that be the vector for talking about transness. I feel like because queer and trans people have a more visual presence in public life, and the amount of information that like an average person knows or like at least incorporates into their worldview has like broadened over time, that allows more, I feel like I'm saying the word sophisticated a lot, but like there are more sophisticated ways to integrate sci-fi and fantasy concepts with things that people are experiencing in the real world, positive and negative. To go to your question, I feel like this comes up in my work a lot with the idea of like robots and androids and people who have like, a human origin, but they have extended themselves or augmented themselves with technology in some way. And there are lots of ways that that can go in terms of changing, your physical appearance, changing your, the way people read you, and how that's often infused with gender markers, like consciously or subconsciously. And that's not something that is exclusive with transness or trans identity in any, by any means. Like this is often something I also see covered with like disability representation, like all kinds of like social signifiers. But, transness, like, and just gender in general, like that intersects with how we associate with technology, the powers of technology, the responsibilities of technology, the association with different things. Like I can go into more detail, but I could also like talk about this for like 2 hours if you let me. I'm curious. I'd also be interested to hear if anybody else finds that or recognizes things like that with how this is seen in sci-fi with like robots or androids or that kind of thing, like how people read, you know, robotic figures as, male or female or none of the above.
And there's also the sort of, like in Cade's, like there's like a metaphorical like change for a character between being demonic and being human, or another story, it's a question of you can augment your body more easily or differently in ways that are different from what we were able to do, even though we can do many things, IRL. Um, yeah, I mean, like Kate, when you sort of developed, I wasn't sure if that was going to be how your character would have an additional sort of transition through the story.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of, it's interesting to think about because in like a weird way, because I'm also kind of writing like a sci-fi thing, but it just mainly it's not as much as about trans identity as rather just has a trans main character. And I don't know why. I just keep thinking back to like someone like arguing about like why their Boulder Skate 3 character would have top surgery scars. And it's just like, because it just happens, you know? Like,
Right, right.
like sometimes, and I think that there is kind of like a beauty in that too, of just like, I mean, like, obviously your story should always have rules set up that are grounded within the story. And there's definitely like different ways that people can read things, but I also think like that's kind of the fun thing about also being a trans creator is like you just want to like just share your experience and even kind of like a a minute way, and it's like you can kind of just like bend and warp elements of your story to just kind of have these characters to have a way to demonstrate them outside of like those typical stories that we see where it is kind of what we were talking about earlier, whether it's just like trans 101 or it's just like pain and grief. And it's just like sometimes we just want these characters to exist within these worlds. And, obviously like finding a reason for that is fun to do, but also sometimes it's just kind of fun to just be like, well, it just happens, And so I guess like with mine, with Stephen transitioning, he was also trans as a demon, but the metaphor of transitioning to a human is a sense that was something he's always desired to be. It kind of just like completes that full, and of course, you're always on a transitional journey throughout your entire life, but it just kind of like makes it feel like more complete. He can finally accept himself and his transness all as one and finally see himself the way that he wants to be. So that was kind of the through line with that. And so, I just think it's kind of just like fun to like, you can either write things into it where it kind of just like ties into sense with the story. But then also, just sometimes it's just fun to go, do whatever you want.
Well, speaking of allegories, Jadzia superheroes are very queer and very trans, like by the nature of how they operate in society.
So much so.
If you want to expand on why that's been significant for you as a creator and a writer.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the superheroes are on the face of it very queer as a concept, and we can argue about whether that's intentional or not, or whether that's a reader's reading of it, but it's there. I mean, you have these
Hmm.
characters who have this other life, right? This more colorful, more dangerous, but definitely more exciting life that they run around in skin-tight outfits. And but that's something they can't tell their coworkers and can't tell their families sometimes. This whole
Yeah.
other world where they are powerful and exciting and fabulous, and then have to stuff that back into the cave beneath their house and put on
Hmm.
their normal clothes and go out and meet the rest of the world.
To keep their
And so,
families safe, of course,
right,
right? It's
right,
like,
to keep everybody safe. So there's this wonderful closet metaphor just baked into
yeah.
superheroes in general, and the fact that um, you have so many characters who are very sexualized. They're drawn in an attractive way on purpose, and they're in these skin-tight outfits. And oftentimes you have characters of similar genders who are partnered up together and have long-running storylines about their friendship and how deep and lovely that friendship is. And it's hard not to see a queer relationship in that because of just the love that is poured into it from the creators, maybe intending it, maybe not. There's speculation on many sides that you can
Yeah.
argue. Um, and so as a genre, they feel very queer on the face of it. And they also feel very trans. The act of transformation is very like part and parcel with the superhero concept. The idea that like bodies are changed, they are made more muscular or um, smaller or larger, or you get the lower half of a horse. Like all of these things happen
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
superhero comics. Like bodies are malleable like clay and that.
Hmm.
And um, so as a queer reader and as a trans reader, there's a lot to take from that that feels right. And again, whether it's intentional or not is beside the point because it's there to if you're looking for it, and I was certainly looking for it. and
Yeah.
found so much to see myself back reflected in these characters who long to have a transformation of the body, who had these close relationships with um, other people who it could be considered gay. Like all of this stuff was there, and I just ate it up with a spoon.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not the one who wrote about people getting hormone surgery from a laser in space. That was Jack Kirby. Like,
Right.
I don't know that he knew that's what he was doing, but that is what he wrote.
That's
Anyway,
yeah.
it's anyway. So speaking of colorful artists such as Jack Kirby, Rin, you have a very distinctive color palette and aesthetic that really is all over this series, and I was curious, sort of, how you developed that. It's very joyful, and like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you. I'm constantly like, people always bring up Lisa Frank whenever they see my stuff, which I love. And it actually kind of comes from a really deeply personal space that also is hand in hand with queerness. I grew up like a super poor kid. And I have so many memories of going to Target, or not Target, we're too expensive, Kmart when I was younger, during back to school season. And I would just, my mom would let me sit in the folder aisle so I could look at Lisa Frank folders and binders. Because we couldn't buy them because they were too expensive. We could not afford the like five, we could do the 5 cent folders, but Lisa Frank too expensive. Um, and I remember sitting there for like an entire hour, 2 hours while my mom shopped, thinking like, I just wish I was in this world where things were colorful and things were sparkly and where like rainbow, like unicorns were just like riding rainbows in outer space because that's like where I wanted to be. I was always the kid who was always daydreaming, always drawing, always writing. Um, because I think for me, like writing and art, it is a sandbox in which we can kind of play around with our identities and discover, things about ourselves that maybe we didn't know until we got it on paper or got it on screen. Um, so it actually really comes, I do like just love the way bright colors look. But I think some people have this idea that like Rin's style is how many colors can they put on a single page and like not have it make somebody's eyes bleed. There actually is a theory behind it. And it actually just really comes from I joke like I loved looking at the Lisa Frank like unicorns in outer space. For me, Cass, the main character, they are my unicorn in outer space. So that is sort of really what I wanted to create was like this world that wasn't, sort of based in sort of like tragedy or struggle. It was this world that was really vibrant and really fun, that my characters inhabited. Because when I was little, like the world that I wanted to inhabit when I was younger, this is like Neon Pantheon is a YA comic, even though I think I do a pretty good job of like hiding that. It is a YA comic, so I wanted to give kids their version of the Lisa Frank binders that they couldn't afford. I wanted to give them a sort of bright and sparkly and colorful world that they could inhabit, even just for, a few minutes every week, that maybe was a little brighter than the ones that they inhabited in real life.
It's also just cool for me to see these characters inhabiting that space who aren't necessarily like who aren't like girls, right?
Mhm.
Because we get so many things like color coded and shoved into like if you like things that are sparkly, if you like purple, then like that means you're a girl. It's as opposed to like maybe you're Prince. Like it could be many things. Um, so I thought it was cool to
Yes.
have these non-binary characters also specifically like have and be in that aesthetic.
Yeah, and the music is a huge part of Neon Pantheon. I mean, it's the MacGuffin is a cassette tape and a cassette player. Glam rock and disco is like a huge influence in the comic, which has always the iconography behind the 1970s Bowie, Prince, like has always been very challenging gender norms and what we think of as masculine. Because all my characters, like male, female, non-binary, they're all wearing like 9-inch platform heels all of the time, even in like action sequences. So yeah, I think they're all kind of like intertwined in a way.
And wearing crazy platform shoes you can't walk in a comic is trans joy because it doesn't matter that you can't walk in them. We suspend our disbelief in gravity for so many ways. Um, uh, Another sort of thought is like we often read our own work through the eyes of our own, like, the harshest critic of ourselves that we could manifest. Like, you have this idea of, like, what is the worst interpretation somebody could possibly have of my work? What is the wrongest one? What's the one that someone who's like, especially like, just like, never mind, like, whatever some MAGA people think, like, what is the worst possible read of what I did that, like, a fellow, like, trans or non-binary person could have? And, like, how do I stop and protect myself from having made them think that about this thing I did? I don't know if you guys have advice for writers and artists about how to, and that's not just for comics, that's for anything that people make.
You gotta let it go. You gotta let it go. Like, you can't worry about that stuff. Like, you can't write for an imagined audience, because that's not one who's going to read your stuff. The people who are reading your stuff are their own people. They're not the people in your head. They have their own lives and thoughts and feelings, and they're going to come up with reactions to your work that is not something you can even imagine. Like, that's so you can't write for people who are in your head, who's this theoretical critical audience. And, like, the reality is that you're not going to get it right for everybody. Like, no one does. I can't tell you how many times that I have been told that my work was doing trans wrong. It is less than the amount of times that people have told me that I'm doing trans right and they felt seen and everything was beautiful and wonderful. I can tell you that. But it's like, our experiences as trans people are so similar in so many ways. And then there always comes a point where individual lives deviate. And sometimes that deviation can feel like a betrayal, or it can feel like something like, no, you don't get it, because you were with me up until that point, and then your life
Right.
took a different mode, and now who am I then? And that can be jarring sometimes. And it can especially be jarring when you're doing that with a work of fiction and jibing so hard up until a point and then things turn. Um, you know, this is not true with every transmasc reader who's read Galaxy, certainly, but some transmasc readers did not like it. And they did not like it because it's girly. And, like, that wasn't their experience. And to see that sort of thing celebrated was not their trans experience, which is totally valid. And, like, yeah, of course, it shouldn't be. I wasn't trying to be everybody's
Right.
trans experience with it. So I don't build anyone ill will who didn't jibe. But it's like little things like that that can mean the very important difference. So yeah, you can't please everyone. You shouldn't try. Some people are not going to like it. Some people are going to have a bad faith argument. Some people are going to have a good faith argument where it just comes from a very genuine place and it just wasn't their book. And that's cool. That happens. And, like, you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with being fallible, which is really hard for a lot of writers, because it's like, no, I can control everything. I'm writing it.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
in
yeah.
control. I can make it for everybody, and everything can be good. And, like, you can't. You just need to accept that.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd say we can like also broaden that idea to the question of like cis writers writing trans characters, right, is often something that is like the idea is met with, apprehension.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of those things where, you can tell when something is written, like when a character or a concept is written with like compassion and a curiosity to like understand that idea and communicate something like from a place of like well-intentioned curiosity. Like you can tell that. And writing trans characters is also an interesting situation where like, to our knowledge, like that writer might be cis, but maybe like give them 5 years, or
Yeah,
get like,
right.
maybe that's
It's
just like not,
complex, right? You
yeah, it's
can't.
complex. It may not be part of their public life. Like it's just something where we truly don't know and may never know, like, if
Yeah.
this is like a cis person, telling this story. Like it really is something where, a writer who is, like practicing good writerly practice, which is like being compassionate and curious and like, like exploring characters in that way it's good actually.
Yeah, I think the line there, right, is that is your character a trans person who has an internal life and things in their lives outside of being trans and
Mhm.
a hobby and a favorite band and a romantic partner and a restaurant they go to whenever they're feeling down? Or is your trans character representing transness in your story to teach someone else a lesson about
Right.
the broader diversity of humanity?
Hmm.
And like it's really that kind of thing. It's like the good ones are always the ones that are just more people
Hmm.
versus like an abstraction that they put a name and a body in.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, how do you feel about like how do you approach sort of trying to express like a character's gender euphoria specifically, like when you're telling a story?
I mean, it depends on the character. It all goes back to the individual, right? Like a different character is going to have different gender euphoria in different ways. Um, the Galaxy experiences gender euphoria trying on homecoming dresses. That's not everybody, but like it is for her.
Yeah.
And it's this wonderful moment in the first book with her and her girlfriend and her feeling that there's these identities that come with these dresses and they all maybe they don't fit, but they're all feminine. And like picking and choosing that feminine identity through these various forms. Um, and then finding one that is her as opposed to these other ones that are feminine but not
But not
her.
her. Yeah.
And that element there. But that's not going to work with every character, and that's not going to work certainly with a trans masc character or a non-binary character. Maybe with a non-binary character, it depends on how their style is. So
Mhm.
it all depends. Like again, it's no trans person is a monolith. Like everyone is just an individual with their own wants and needs, and the fictional characters have to be that way as well.
It just sort
Hmm.
of feels like it's a experience that seems harder to translate to cis people than a lot of other things. Like,
Well, I just had a conversation today, right before this, with a neighbor who um didn't realize that I wrote books until recently and then went out and bought them, which was very sweet. And she was reading it and was really enjoyed Galaxy and we were talking about metaphor and uh allegories and really enjoyed the alien allegory and metaphor because Galaxy is both metaphorically trans and also literally trans. We
mhm.
do have it both ways because we can do that as trans people, cis people can't. Um, sorry, I don't make the rules. Uh, but but she really appreciated the alien allegory, the fact
Mhm.
that Galaxy is trying to be who she is and not hide as a human being. Because it allowed her an access to trans identity that she'd never had before.
Mm.
Um, Getting caught up in like gender transition was difficult for her, but having this sort of alien to human and human to alien transition, that was something she could wrap her head around and get in and crawl into and see herself reflected in a way that maybe she wouldn't had in a more realistic storyline. So I think there's a lot to be said for this sort of allegory when done properly, like Blue was saying with robots and cybernetics and that sort of thing, that allows not just us to see ourselves in new ways, but also cis audiences as well.
Hmm. Other
Uh,
ways, like you can think about, I was going back to your original question about how to show gender euphoria on the page. And other ways that I've seen that done interestingly in comics is like when you see characters like behavior changing, or like sometimes you can see that in like not just in like the clothes that they wear, as Jadzia was saying, but like their speaking patterns, or like, kind of when they go from like one mixed audience to another and like, they change the way they speak or they change the way they hold they hold themselves or in, like towards like a more feminine or masculine way in a way that like it's almost like you can see them relax or you can see them become like confident or happy in a way that like is maybe more subtle in some respects, but like till a talented storyteller can like show that in a really like meaningful way.
Hmm. What are some of the reasons that like you were creating stories that are about characters who are thriving and not just dealing with the crisis and the emergencies, even though I think it's, a lot of us are feeling that in a really dire way right now.
I think for me, I always joke that Cass, my main character, being trans, non-binary character is the least of their problems. They
Mhm.
have so many problems. Um, and I kind of wanted just to have a main character who was really just living, not necessarily always thriving, but living. Because I think there are some camps, to your point about some of the struggles that we're facing culturally and in society, that there are camps that look at like trans and gender non-conforming people and go like, oh, you people are always making everything about sex and gender. Like, what's wrong with you? When it's like, actually, no, you are the ones who are always talking about this. You are the ones who are making legislation that we have to respond to. Like, you keep bringing it up. I just want to live. So
Mhm.
I really kind of wanted to have a character that was just living. Like, being a non-binary character is a huge part of this character's identity. They express it a lot through clothing. Sometimes they present very male, sometimes they present very female. Sometimes they're kind of in weird spaces in between. And that is a big part of their personality, but it is at the end of the day, like it is a trait, just like how they're kind of, really self-loathing, but they're also really funny. And this is a bipolar character, so sometimes they're kind of manic, sometimes they're kind of depressive, and they're also non-binary. So it's one of like many traits. So I think for me that was an important thing. And sometimes I actually, to kind of go back to a previous question, like when it comes to like harsh criticism that we kind of like create and kind of like anticipate, sometimes I kind of like am writing like my script and I think like, am I doing like trans wrong? Like, am I doing, even though like I'm writing a non-binary character and I am a non-binary person, I'm like, am I doing this wrong? Because like I feel like, they want us to struggle. So in my mind, I'm like, maybe having a sort of like kind of like fun, like colorful, still like serious at times, like YA comic, maybe it's like not appropriate at this time. Um, but I think the readers and the comments and the feedback I've gotten have kind of proven that I'm on the right track. But yeah, I
You
think
are.
for me that
Yeah.
thank you. I think that's really, how I answer it. Is by just having a character who's just kind of living, even though sometimes it's really, really joyful and sometimes it's not, but it's still life, despite certain people not wanting us to have one at all.
Yeah, I'm kind of like what Rin's saying, very much the same on that. My comic, it does kind of focus more on, especially towards the latter end, of kind of like having that gender dysphoria. But I think, kind of as everyone else here has said, it's in the way that it's presented that can make it different. And that when we have like when we normally show like trans people struggling, it is just like giving them a butt ton of trauma and then just like having them sort through it without like understanding that trans people know that they have trauma and they know what this trauma is. They don't need to see someone else like them also going through something similar without any sort of like earned payoff or anything. They want to
Mhm.
see the characters they relate to overcome the problems just as they hope that they can. And so I think it's in the way that it's structured of like how you can get like to that point of like where you are representing a character positively by just like showing earnestness in the way that you write them. And we all have our struggles with gender dysphoria. It's how we kind of got to this point. And then so to kind of like show a very earned way of reaching that gender euphoria is how we can, progress forward and even have other people like feel even more emotionally attached or even more like comfortable with exploring their gender identity because they know that there's like an out for them. And so,
Mhm.
you just have to have like that honestness of like making them human, making them have relatable problems instead of just be like, here's a bunch of trauma on you, sort it out. And it's just instead like, have them have bad days, but have them have good days, have them, explore new things just as you would like any other standard character, to kind of make that feel earned, just like any other kind of character.
Yeah, yeah. Um, when what would it's funny because I feel like in some ways I sort of like have a little envelope of like this is what I would tell people, despite the fact that I'm new to writing fiction, not new to writing criticism, but new to writing fiction. Like, what is your standard advice you give to cis creators, writers or artists who want to create trans characters but are worried about getting it wrong?
I would say I'm actually going to call back to something that I think it was Rin that mentioned a little bit ago, which is the idea that like cis people have ideas about gender all the time and are often just like they've not been taught to like think consciously about it. It's just kind of subsumed in this like miasma that we all live in. And it's one of those things where like if you are intrigued by the idea of like having a trans character in your stories, and again, that could be all kinds of things. I felt compelled to make a comic about trans characters, and I want to do my research properly, as an ally. Like this is like 15 years ago. I just felt compelled to do it. I want to do it right. I would say, in addition to reading other work by trans creators, not necessarily for a checklist of what to do, but just to kind of see that like breadth and diversity of how like trans writers write about trans characters, is to think about how gender impacts all of your characters, or like how how like thinking about gender, like navigating through the world in terms of like your gender and your appearance and your like social standing and everything, like how that informs all of the characters, because that might often not only unlock interesting insights about your characters, like other motivations and goals and aspirations, but it may provide some interesting clarity about like, oh, why do I think this way? Why did I feel like this character would say this thing or do this thing or believe this thing in a way that might avoid common missteps or misunderstandings?
I think, and just to piggyback off Blue, you were talking about having curiosity. I think like that is such a curiosity and like a spirit of collaboration, I think will prevent you at least a little bit from going astray. I think that for me, easy, low-hanging fruit advice I would give to a cis creator is seek out and pay sensitivity readers. Um, Pay them appropriately. I actually recently did this because I had an Arrow Ace character have a brief kind of like chunk of dialogue in my script that I wanted to like just have a sensitivity reader on because I'm not, Arrow Ace. But like in my mind, I was like, well, I'm like super deep in the queer community. Like I'm just doing this to like just to,
Just a double
be
check. Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
just to double check. They're not going to have any problem. I don't know. I was such a jerk. I was like so confident it was going to be totally fine. And then I got their notes back and I was like, oh my God, like I cut out a whole bunch of like a whole chunk of text. I really modified some of the other stuff and I was like, wow. But in a way, like because I'm curious and collaborative, like I wasn't like, wow, I'm so stupid. Like I wasn't
Yeah.
like I was like, this is really cool. I actually really genuinely learned something. Somebody got paid. I learned something. Like what a nice like and they were also a creator themselves. What a nice like kind of interaction this was. So I
Yeah,
would say sensitivity readers is huge.
yeah. Like there's somebody out there who will work for whatever it is your need is. Like
Oh yeah.
there's, there's somebody out there for your need.
I have
Um,
been that sensitivity reader for people, in both a paid and non-paid context. And one thing that I find that a lot of cis writers, when they have this like trans idea, trans character they want to put in a story, and like they really want this, and they're very passionate about it, and I can see that. The main thing that I've noticed in a lot of different writers and a lot of different stories is there's a desire to focus on the pre-transition self a lot, and like to really dig into that, or to have something like And then from their pre-transition life, this comes back and everything just changes. And like, I would say if I had to give like an easy thing, it's like, don't focus so hard on who they were before transitioning. Instead, make your story on who they are after the transition. Um, because I don't know why cis writers are so into that part and want to focus on that and are less into the post stuff. I don't know. It's not up to me. I don't have to know. It's
I think because there's that struggle
yeah,
there that they are obsessed with. Yeah.
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 And so like I would say if you wanted to do a trans character, maybe have little to no discussion of the pre-transition self and
Yeah.
focus instead on the post-transition self. That would be my advice.
I definitely see that. Yeah, I am keeping an eye on the comments, although I'm not like going to respond to everything, but I do think there's an interesting thing I will share. Somebody says, I wonder if they think it's more relatable to them or something. And I do think that it's that tendency they have sort of stems from the fact that they do still see people as whatever it was they saw them as before that person transitioned. And so that's like the thing that lives in their head, which is why like you deal with people who you could like you tell they're fucking trying, but like, whenever I run into somebody who's like, wait, so if they're a trans woman, does that mean that like the thing I said is the thing they are? Like I don't know why, but that's the thing that they fucking get stuck on.
Yeah.
And I think that that's been instructive to me to see that consistently be the thing that people who are cis who are making an effort seem to get boggled by. And I think this tendency is sort of stemming from the same stumbling block. So just like see people as the thing they are now, and that will help you understand what you're doing. Um, so anyway, and then also maybe magically you'll stop using the wrong pronouns for people who you've known for a long time. I don't know. Um, right. So what are some of the stories you wish you had seen growing up? And how does that influence what you make now? And I'll expand it beyond growing up. I'll include like when you were younger, even as a younger adult, even though some of you were quite young.
Hmm.
I can jump in really quick just because there's always, I think for me, I consumed a lot of really great stories and a lot of really great media. And I'm kind of bringing it back to something, I think it was something Jadzia said, um, how we're getting better at having more ownership over the stories and being able to sort of X-Men and like Sailor Moon, I was obsessed with growing up, both very queer coded things. Um, but everything was always so hush hush, right? So like when I was like 11, or I think Blue, you said this, kids are not stupid. I was not stupid. Like I knew Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune were not cousins.
Hmm.
I knew they were not cousins.
That was
But
big
like
schoolyard gossip when I was growing up.
those kids are not dumb. We're not dumb. But the fact that they like sent like changed and like it says like, oh, but like they can't be lovers because that's bad. So it needed to be changed. But now, since we're kind of creating these stories and having more ownership, we can actually just have them be lovers. We don't need to like code as much anymore. Like we always talk about things with queer coding, queer coded. Like I just wanted to be queer, like
Yeah.
less coding, right? So I feel like
Yeah.
I was able to see a lot of really great media and stuff, and there were so many influential, amazing things that I consumed when I was younger. But I'm just glad there's just as amazing things being made, but they can like be more of what they are especially for younger people who need them now.
Mhm.
I
I guess
definitely want to ask people like, is that how you are with your cousin? Like, I have other questions. Yes, sorry, go ahead,
They're
Blue.
really close cousins, yeah.
Kissing cousins, if you will.
I was trying to think about this because, like, I don't know. I try not to lose too much sleep over, what would have happened if I had learned about such and such thing or such and such people if I was, 12 or 15 or
Yeah.
whatever. I'm also, I came out as non-binary in my like mid 20s and I was like also a COVID trans egg crack. So, like I have my people, like I have a community and like a, body of literature that I've read that helped me kind of process it. But I have found through, researching this more, there does seem to be like not as much of a backlog of like transmasc comics that, or at least that I was able to find like from like when I would have read it. Like it would have been interesting to see what that had been like. That said, like the transmasc comic scene right now is incredible. So, you know,
It sure is.
It's so good. I mean, and I should also say, like, it's, you know, it's not like there was a massive amount of like trans femme like comics literature, but like it's interesting to see what that, like, what the waves are, right? The waves of like coming and going over different like decades and different years is very, very interesting to like research and study.
Can you make some suggestions for what to read
Oh, like right now, like
right
trans.
now?
Well, in terms of like transmasc comic artists that are knocking out of the park, like right now, Max Graves, What Happens Next, Nero Villagaius O'Reilly does really good stuff. Oh God, I'm gonna remember more in like, you know, 5 hours. But yeah, there's just like some really, really excellent like transmasc work and transfem work. Like it's just, it's so good. There's so much good stuff being
There's
made
so
right
much.
now. Oh, like Shosef and Anka's Superpose, like I'll just keep yelling things as I remember them.
Great. Other folks, chime in.
Yeah, Alison Bechdel's Dykes to Watch Out For was such an important book for me to read. I'm forever grateful to my high school theater teacher who saw, I guess, the lesbian within and gave me those books or let me borrow those books. And like, it just really was an amazing window
Mm.
into um, a group that I knew, I guess, in my heart that I belonged to, but like didn't also. And so it was really nice to have that experience and to read those books and to lose myself into those characters in that world. Um, and then to be a Bechtel fan for life as I am now. Very easy to do. I'm sure I'm not the only one. And so yeah, those were life-saving in a way that I don't know if um, my teacher at the time, shout out Mrs. McGee, knew, but it changed so much. It changed the way I thought about stuff. It gave me an opportunity to see queerness in like this wonderful light that was
Mm.
both warts and all, but also celebratory.
Yeah.
And it like changed the way I made comics, like reading those books. So that is definitely mine.
Any other reading suggestions for folks from the panel at large?
I'm gonna
What's Robin's comic? Give me a minute. I will find it.
I'm gonna be that person. Galaxy
Yeah.
actually came out in 2022, which
Oh,
is
what's that? I haven't
basically,
heard of that one.
yeah, it's like this little like known like yeah, writer. You may have heard of her, but it came out in 2022. And that's right when I decided to do my own comic. And I found it actually very inspiring. Because Neon Pantheon is a lot of it's a kitchen sink genre thing, but it actually is kind of secretly a superhero comic. So I actually don't even know where my old copy of Galaxy is. I like it's made the rounds to all of my like
Mm.
trans friends like who always love it and buy their own copy. I have the new book right here next to me that I'm waiting to open and get into. So
Oh,
yeah, not to be like the annoying like fan boy slash girl slash
there's
entity, but
there's nothing annoying
Galaxy.
about this right now. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
Yes, I really recommend Galaxy. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Actually, Blue, I'd love to hear more about what you've been working on most recently.
Oh, well, your timing's great, actually. I have a book that I'm announcing like literally today. It's not trans sci-fi, but it is sci-fi like through a like queer lens.
Yeah.
It's an adaptation of a Cory Doctorow short story, but I mean, I've done all kinds of like graphic novels and short stories where I feel like my perspective as a queer person informs what I think about like science fiction and technology a lot. I How much time would we have? I had a little sidebar that I was
Oh,
thinking about when it came to like
we can go late. Like we were told because this is the last panel of the day. If we want to go late, we can go late. And
gotcha, okay. Something that I was thinking about earlier too, when it comes to like thinking about trans and queer concepts as like science fiction is in some ways, like, you know, those of us who are like socially transitioning, medically transitioning, like that is in some way like a technology. Like my friends are gonna laugh at me because I'm about to press the Ursula Le Guin button, but like she has a saying that is like, you know, interrogating like what technology is. And technology isn't just stuff like, you know, computers and robots, but it's also stuff like, you know, fish hooks and shoes. Like it's things that people have developed to improve their lives, and they're like practices that people make. And the ways that people have developed to transition and like improve their lives over the world is like something that's really interesting to me. And it is like a science fiction concept. It's something that we can document like what's happening now and extrapolate on and think about like, you know, what are the logical and illogical conclusions of that, and in like a interesting way. So I'm always thinking about that constantly with my work. That's what the kind of thing I like to make.
So this adaptation is going to be the next piece that comes out.
Yeah, so the graphic novel Unauthorized Bread is coming out April 20th, 2027. I'm literally like announcing the cover any hour now today.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Thank you.
And yeah, Cade, you wrapped your story, and I want to know what's coming next.
Oh, yes, I'm also working on a sci-fi story as well. The prologue just released yesterday. And so if you want to read, it's just called Rift, RIFT series dot card, CARRD.co. It's just like a 11-page prologue. And then I'll be releasing updates weekly in June on the 5th.
That's exciting. So it's going to be on your website in like regular.
Yeah, it'll be posted on Comic Fury since I'm kind of done with Webtoon.
Well, it's a hard question because I mean, when people are like all just like, oh, go at it yourself, you're like, yeah, but it's kind of easier to build an audience if you're on a platform where people are already looking for your stuff. On the other hand, everybody who runs everything doesn't get it. Like it's hard. I sympathize with that
Yeah,
debate, you
for
know?
sure. And you know, and like that's kind of the thing because it's interesting because like traditional like comics, you still have to compete with people in store about like the story you want to tell. And of course, that same competition, you know, is remnant of like if your series continues, if they hire you on for other, you know, characters and other stories to write there. So like that's all, like that's a competition that's also now entering into the webcomic space, especially like for independent creators. Especially with Webtoon, they recently like updated their guidelines. So like if you have any sort of like mental health topics, like if you create a new series and you advise that you have like any sort of like mental health topics such as like, you know, like thoughts of suicide or thoughts of self-harm, it gets auto flagged as mature, which essentially means that no one can find your comic unless they're specifically looking for it on a search. So, you know, it's like it's really become difficult to kind of post things online. So there's been like a bunch of like new sites kind of like coming in to kind of like help alleviate the stress that Webtoon has caused to creators, but at the same time, it's like it's also these sites are created by people who are creators on Webtoons, and so it's like kind of just everyone kind of reading and supporting each other, which is super awesome. But it is kind of like hard to bring in those audiences on a virtual platform, especially when more larger companies make it really hard to post more realistic, you know, humans, especially with Webtoon. They have a whole AI thing, which I could scream about forever.
Yeah.
No worries about that.
But like how do they even define mental illness? Is it like somebody who has ADHD can't like mention that? Or is it just like going to stigmatize some things and not others? Like how the fuck do you define that?
They used to have a rating system, which is where you would do like 1 through 4 of like, does it have any sort of nudity? Like, what kind of nudity? And they would just do stuff like that for each kind of like topic that would be matured. But for the mental health section, like, you know, it's like no topics of mental health. And then one is like, you know, thoughts of suicide or self harm. If you click that one, it's immediately going to be put into a mature rating based off of their new content criteria.
That trick is so strange.
It is so weird.
It's almost like people creating arbitrary binary distinctions between things are inherently going to be flawed and end up pushing things in weird ways that aren't really reflective of
Mhm.
the world. I don't know. It's just something
Yeah.
I've noticed.
And I think it's
Um,
important to show themes like that too, even when you are a YA. It's not like you're encouraging people to have those kind of thoughts, but you're helping them be seen so that they don't have that sense of aloneness that they currently are feeling.
but
It's
like,
important.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I figure this is probably true for people here because this is just true broadly, but like I was reading books for adults when I was a kid. I mean, not like when I was like 6, but like I was like reading all this stuff about every beatnik's heroin addiction all through high school. And like I
Yeah.
didn't use heroin and
Yeah.
I don't understand
Yeah.
like what do they think is going to happen? I mean, we
Mhm.
know we I guess what they think is going to happen is that somehow their kid will be different from them. But
Hmm.
one of the things that's been mystifying to me is seems like there is some desire coming from some young people towards protecting their innocence about things, which is just alien to someone my age. I don't know, man.
Mhm.
For sure.
Um, yeah, because I wanted to read anything that wasn't for kids, like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
anyway. Well, thank you all for joining me. I'm going to give people an opportunity if there's anything else that you want to shout out that you've been working on, or any other, because I did mention work by other creators. If your brain has come back around again and you're like, oh, the
Yeah,
thing,
yeah, I got it. I got it now.
do it
So
now.
everyone,
Yeah.
we can't talk about Transmass comics right now without talking about Cody Okamoto's Keeping Time,
Mm.
which is like the best comic being made right now, bar none. I love that comic so much. Cody is doing such amazing stuff with time and character and examinations of masculinity, and it's my favorite comic right now. I love it so much. I wish it came out every day, but Cody has to draw it. I also want to give a shout out to Blade Maidens, done by my friends Zoe
Yes.
Tunnel
Zoe.
and Valentine Smith. Zoe's also doing some other great stuff coming out later
Mhm.
this year. Zoe's on fire, so look out
Yes, she is.
for her stuff because it's really sharp. Like Seven Wives is the crime book that's coming out,
Mhm.
and you should definitely go and pick that up because it's like awful in the way that all crime books should be. So definitely get that. And another favorite comic is Robin Brooks's Spell X Sword at spellxsword.com. It
Hmm.
is ingenious. It's this wonderful idea of like people who are heroic adventurers, but they're in like a modern city. And so a lot of it is it's the contrast of the mundane and the fantastical. Um, and like you get mana out of soda machines and like you have to uh, get a monster out of like a fast food restaurant and stuff like that and like it's all these low level
Yeah.
quests that these people get from their cell phones and it's so biting and it's a wonderful like it's like satire on a level but also it's a really nice character work about these two adventurers who I think are going to get together. I don't know.
What's the
Um,
series called again?
Spell X Sword. I think Robin's actually watching this. So like,
Oh.
Robin, I hope they get together. Uh,
Thank you for posting that
oh,
in the comments. It's spellx sword.com.
it's so good. So everybody should read that too. And as far as things that now that I've talked about other people, I can talk about me and feel good about it because I've talked about other people. Galaxy, As the World Falls Down, just came
Yep.
out, as Rin said. Anyone can get it. Galaxy is going to be showing up in the big DC summer crossover Justice League Dream Girls that I'm writing with Nicole Maines and has an incredible um, amount of artists. Like the talent that we're getting for this just blows my mind all the time. Nicola
Mhm.
Scott, I think is how you pronounce it.
Yeah, Nicola Scott from
Yeah,
Oh.
Six.
is
Yes.
doing some stuff, and then we also have Jay Bone. Dan
Mm.
Jurgens does a bit in issue two, which
Wow.
is like I never thought that would happen.
Hmm.
It's a and Ted and Roe, Brandon Stein are doing
Oh, yay.
a bunch of stuff in it. They're doing like the real world, in the midst of all these other things that are happening
Oh,
around
cool.
it. And
Yeah.
yeah, just a lot of wonderful queer creators, a lot of wonderful straight creators, a lot of wonderful cis creators, a lot of wonderful trans creators all coming together in this mini series that's going every week in June. So it's a weekly mini series. June, you'll get all 4 issues, and it's just a lot of fun. It's just been a lot of fun to make, a lot of fun to see the art come in, and I think everyone is going to join it, especially if you've already read Justice League Intergalactic, which just came out like a couple weeks ago. Too many things.
So many things. I mean,
Because there's even an announcement for something that's coming next week. So keep your eyes peeled for that when I talk about it. But not going to divulge it now. But like next week, it'll be announced. But yeah, Justice League Intergalactic. You can still probably get a copy of it. You'll want that when you start Justice League Dreamgirls.
Anyone else want to sign off and give some suggestions? I will shout out Jude Doyle and, oh my gosh, who's his artist? But the series Dead Teenagers is just
Yes. Oh, I love Dead Teenagers so much.
Can I
really,
oh, go ahead.
it's going to be really interesting, like teen horror series with queer and trans characters, but it's like 90s. I not you know, or at least in the past-ish enough in some ways that are fun for me as an oldie person. But yes, go ahead, Blue.
Okay, so I was thinking I recommended some transmasc creators right now that are killing it. Some trans femme creators and works that I'm really enjoying right now. Daisy McGuire is doing Yellow Brick Ramble, which is a like explicitly trans retelling of like the Wizard of Oz stories, which those who know like already has like a really cool like trans femme lens on it, and Daisy's just like making that real, and it's very sweet, super accessible. That's great. On the other end of the scale, I also really like the sci-fi horror comics of Sloan Hong. If you like your sci-fi of the like Cronenberg, Paul Verhoeven variety, like Sloan Hong is like exceptional at it. And she's got some short stories that came out for the Short Box Comics Fair that I really, really like.
Oh, nice. They got a really good aesthetic too.
Yes, absolutely.
Caitlin Yarsky is the artist for Dead Teenagers, and she's killing it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. Must read for horror fans. Discerning horror fans. I'm like specific and particular about horror, so we get to. Well, thank you all for joining us again. And I'll just promote to my listeners, this will be appearing on Graphic Policy Radio, which means that you can tell your friends who missed this to go listen to Graphic Policy Radio and hear the conversation that we just had. You can also do things like go and listen to interviews that I've had in the past, some of the distance past, some a little bit less distant with some of the folks who are joining me today. You can also talk to me on Blue Sky, where I am too often, where my handle is Levin, V as in Victor. And if anybody wants to shout it again, your own website, so our folks can follow your work, let's do that. Blue, where are they finding you?
Blue Delliquanti, first name, last name, .com. Or you can read my webcomic, Oh Human Star, for free online at ohhumanstar.com. I'll pop that in the chat.
Yes. And Cade, one more time.
Oh yeah. You can go to Cade, ahhcade.card.co.
Love it. Jadzia, you're all over DC Comics just in general, but also just go to dc.com and we'll find you.
Right, you'll find me eventually. Yeah, Jadzia, Axelrod.com. And that's my website, recently revamped, that has links to how to get all my books. My neighbor, who I mentioned earlier, that's how she bought them, was through that. So yeah, go there if you want to get some.
And Rin, is that neonpantheoncomic.com?
Yes, every week, every Thursday. Each update is at least 2 pages, sometimes as many as 5, and there's currently over 150 pages to read if you're looking for something new to read.
Just like lose a whole afternoon and or a weekend.
No better way to spend
this
your time.
weekend. You could just do that now. Just go do that now. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you all too. Thank you so much. That was an amazing panel. Thank you, thank you, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you to the Nibbin Ink Fest people, including myself. And I wanted to just quick shout out. I'm going to send our Ko-fi and the Oops All Comics charity zine in the chat. You
Yes.
can donate to us, and we can keep running these events and keep hosting this sort of thing. But yeah, like you said, thank you all so much for coming, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Saturday.
Oh, yes. And shout out to Cartoonist United again. You guys are doing really important work to make comics a more functional, supportive, justice-oriented space. And I think being able to host online events like this that are accessible to people who can't do in person for whatever reason is really powerful. And I'm very thankful for that.
And we thank you for being here, everybody. And
Thank
so,
you for
yeah.
having us.
All right.
Thank
See
you.
you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.